Sadboy here, and today we're talking about Cuckoo. Cuckoo is a fish out of the water horror thriller starring Hunter Schafer. It's about a girl named Gretchen being taken by her father and stepmother to the German Alps. There's a family friend there buying land and developing a resort, and her parents are going to help out with like the design process, and so they get to live there for free. And who wouldn't love that, right? You get to live in a big mansion in the Alps for free. Well, Gretchen really hates it, and this feeling of disdain allows her to kind of see through the beauty of the nature and the home, and she catches on that like something isn't right about all of this. There's a lot of kind of weird stuff going on, a lot of weird behaviors, just not a lot of logic to everything. And she starts even just observing little things that are kind of uncomfortable and strange that just let her realize something that like everyone else isn't seeing because they're blinded by the hospitality of their friend and the beauty of the home, like this just absurdly nice looking house that they get to live in for free in the Alps. She's not really caught up with that because she's a teenager. She just wants to go back to America and be with her friends. She's in a band. Music and sound are like a big theme throughout the movie. So she just wants to go back and be with her friends. And with her biological mother, you find out that like her parents are divorced. She was kind of separated from her mom. Uh, Relationships, like especially like maternal relationship and connection, is a big theme throughout this movie. They touch on it a lot. It was something I didn't quite catch at first in terms of like how prevalent it was. It is one of the bigger themes in the movie, but you really start catching that it has to do with most relationships. Most relationships are in some way kind of like someone's helping or hurting a maternal connection. So yeah, her whole thing is just she wants to go, she wants to get out. It turns out to be pretty difficult though. Without giving anything away, I definitely don't want to give up a lot of what's going on in this movie in the review because probably the more fun part of the movie was not knowing what was going on and then kind of being shown as it continues. There is kind of a supernatural thing going on. You start to have these experiences with the characters where it's like, all right, there's something very weird going on. And there does even seem to be what's maybe like a monster hunting Gretchen. So she gets pursued a couple times, chased by this thing a couple times, and no one really listens to her about it. The movie has a lot going for it. Some aspects are really great, and then the unfortunate thing is it did kind of just like fall flat at the end, which seems to be the consensus online. I think for the most part, the majority of reviews got it right, where it's a good movie, good concept, good execution up until maybe the last 15, 20 minutes or so. It kind of just fizzled. The ending was a little bit generic, but there are some things worth noting. Conceptually, the movie is really original, and although a person being trapped in a uncomfortable environment, an unsafe environment, classic fish out of water horror situation, that's been done plenty of times before. This did feel like a new approach to it though, and it felt like a well-rounded approach. Like they kind of addressed a lot of the issues that exist in fish out of water stories. And the thing that they did the most that really helped address that concern is Gretchen is really annoying. She is a lot of problems. She is definitely an instigator. She's not trustworthy. She has really serious behavioral problems. She lies, she steals, she can be violent at times. So the parents are like kind of correct to not really believe her because it kind of becomes like her versus the family friend that brought her in. And it's like, yeah, I mean, this guy has, seemingly never lied to us and always been very generous to us. We've known him for years. He's a good old friend. He gives us employment. He gives us housing. He gives us a reason to live in the Alps. And then Gretchen, steals money from him, gets in a car accident, does drugs, hits her dad. There's a lot of stuff going on where it's just like a reasonable person wouldn't trust her. Also because it's like they know that she just wants to leave. She doesn't want to be there. She just wants to go back to America. So her character to them has motive to lie, to be deceitful, and she's not showing any behaviors of like being like a legitimate victim. And so you don't get that feeling this wouldn't happen in real life, which happens in a lot of fish out of water situations. You think about a movie where like a spouse or a child or a friend goes to someone and goes like, there's something not right here, this is dangerous, we need to leave, there's something not right, something's going on. Or even, I mean, in her case, like, I was chased, I was attacked, I bashed my head against a door at the hospital and I'm bleeding, and this is like your teenage daughter. You'd be like, okay, something's going on, let's just get her out of here. But in fish out of water movies, they always kind of do the thing where they're like, stop being crazy, maybe you need to sleep. It's like they always like brush it off in a way that's not realistic. It's not something that would happen, and I would hear out anybody in my life if all of this was going on. You would listen to them. But they really do a great job of making it where, even as like the audience viewer, you're like, yeah, why would I ever trust this person? And you kind of have to do that in a fish out of water thing. You have to either discredit the main character, where there's a reason why no one's trusting them. It can be a pattern of behavior like Gretchen. It can be like a situation where it's a person with mental illness, either real or perceived. So either the person does have mental illness, or people think they have mental illness, so that's why everyone's ignoring their complaints. Or you could do something like in Rosemary's Baby, where the reason everyone is ignoring her concerns is because they're all in on it, right? Like, there has to be a thing kind of driving why this person's not being allowed to leave and why they're not being heard out. And I think they did it in a great way. Just a shitty teenager. It's the most believable reason why you would just ignore somebody. So what that ends up doing is it creates the feeling of being a little bit more real, which is what any horror movie needs to have to be scary. You have to feel like this situation could occur. You could be in it. It doesn't feel like she's being brushed off to advance the plot. It feels like she's being brushed off because of who her character is. And that just creates more of a sense of realism to it, which in this very abnormal situation is important. If you don't make this very, paranormal event feel in some way believable, if you don't make her being ignored and being trapped there feel in some way believable, the movie loses the whole experience. So I think they did it well. They weren't like annoying with driving it home. It was just like kind of like normal teenage bullshit, essentially. And I think what's like fun with her during this too is she isn't really unrealistic with denying that it's kind of her fault. She kind of knows like that she sucks and she's done a lot of bad shit. And like, I think there was one scene where the dad actually like listed out a series of things that she did, and it was just like, yeah, why would they listen to me? It's like, I mean, she's still begging for help, and it was kind of sad to see her dad just like ignore, an injured child begging for help. But like, from his perspective, it really does look like she kind of just did this to herself in a way. Kind of consequences of her own action, not really something that came from the environment. And with the whole concept of, perception of, self and others, this movie does a really, really unique altered perception state, which kind of explains why she can't leave. And it makes more sense towards the end of like why specifically she couldn't leave and wasn't being allowed to leave. But it's this thing with like time repeating. People keep hearing this very like high-pitched sound and then experiencing the same like previous moments kind of over and over, and then like in a almost like a condensed state. Like it's really interesting. I enjoyed it when they first introduced it in the movie. I was like, oh, that's fun, like haven't seen that before. It's a creepy visual, and you get to experience it through the eyes of the characters, so you really get to appreciate how disorienting it is for them. I thought it was fun. I thought it was a cool little thing. It was instantly made me a little more interested in the movie. And it ties into the whole monster supernatural thing going on, as you would expect it to. But it's like they kind of get into like what it is. Like, it's I don't know. It's one of those things where, like, as it was explained, I liked it a little bit less. I kind of liked when it was a little more mysterious. It was a little more random. You didn't exactly know where it was coming from, when it was going to happen, but it was cool. And I mean, linking it to everything that's been going on, it's kind of fun because then you get to see like Gretchen is really right, and they're in legitimate danger. So because of this altered perception, it's kind of hard to express it to people or explain it to them. And yeah, it's like everything from just like your conversations to your movements become compromised by this thing, and you don't know what's happening to you when it's happening. It's definitely creepy. You lose a sense of what's real around you during it. It was a fun thing. I liked it. It was a cool little detail. The one thing that I wasn't exactly crazy with it was that they tried to kind of give it this like natural explanation of like how it's linked to the monster or creature, whatever you want to call it. They kind of try to tie it in where it's this thing that this thing can do, and it's kind of just like an animal that can do this. Uh, it's fine. Again, the big running theme with this movie is really cool concepts, cool execution. As they explain things more and as it continues, it kind of weakens. It gets a little bit worse as it keeps going. But, they tie it into this monster, supernatural thing, this natural explanation, trying to. I think the thing is, they tried to make a lot of this stuff seem like it really could happen to you. So, for this altered perception thing to make any sense, it kind of needs a natural explanation. So, they kind of had to do that. But, the whole thing of like this being possible is it's definitely a stretch, and I think I don't know. They tried to make it work. It's like one of those things where you kind of like that's where it weakens from the fish out of water being such a strong execution to this, because they make it very believable that Gretchen is stuck in this dangerous situation, and you as the viewer are aware that like she is right, but everyone else doesn't think that she's right. But then as soon as it's like there's this altered perception thing and it has to do with this monster and it's like an animal that can just do that, that became a lot harder to believe. I couldn't just be like, oh yeah, maybe that could happen. It was just like, I don't know. I think that the like time looping essentially which occurs with the sound could have been explained in maybe a different way. I would have believed a lot of other things besides just like an animal can do that to us. But apart from like the concept of the movie, the performances are good. No one really stood out as like terrible. Hunter Schafer did a solid job. Dan Stevens played a really fun, over the top, creepy German villain, which he just felt so not real. Like there was something very obviously wrong with him, and kind of like everyone other than Gretchen is aware of it. And they actually did get a really good joke out of that. Just Gretchen being aware like this guy's weird and no one else is like picking up on it or saying anything about it. And I'm normally not the biggest fan of humor in horror movies, mostly because it just kind of always feels very forced. It feels really pushed in, like the writers are really going for a joke, and it kind of breaks the moment a little bit. But like with this one, it felt natural. It felt like it worked in the scene, and what was going on was so over the top and like unnerving that it did a kind of humor that I really enjoy, where it almost felt like Gretchen was kind of speaking for the audience. Like you can feel that she's really removed from this whole situation. She's like you. She's not blinded by everything. She knows something's not right. This guy says something really weird, and she calls him on it in a funny way. It got a really good laugh from like the whole theater. And there's not a lot of that too, which I like. They didn't keep trying to get jokes and make laughs. There was just really like one funny part. That was it. It was, yeah, I like that they did that. And going back to Dan Stevens, I loved his character's justification for his actions. So at one point, he describes himself as a conservationist and kind of uses that as just like a blank check for his actions. He can kind of do whatever he wants to whoever he wants because his ultimate goal is that he's a conservationist. And he views that as just being a very morally liberating thing. And I really like that because it creates this kind of like interesting moral discussion around conservationism and preservation of nature and especially rare species of how far are you allowed to go with it. We always assume a conservationist is a good person, right? Like that's just immediately you hear that and they're like they're trying to conserve nature. That's nice. But at what cost? It does introduce that like even something as universally respected as conservationism, being an animal lover, like, trying to really take care of the environment around you and protect it from the damages of humanity. It shows that, like, even that can have, like, a morally gray area where you're just like, what's the limit, How far are you allowed to go to protect what might be globally the most unique, rare, intelligent species that's on Earth? It's an animal that's like no other animal. There's not that many of them left. There's only a few of them. How much are you allowed to sacrifice to preserve that? And I thought that was a cool justification for villain. Like, the way that you create a great villain is they have to have a justification system. A good villain thinks that they're correct. They think they're the good guy. They think they're the one doing the right thing, and they just have to. They're making sacrifices the same way the hero does, because in their story, they're the hero. And that idea of like just throwing that word in, conservationist, it just like right away you can be like, oh, that's how he sees that harming all of these people, manipulating all of these people, doing all these awful things that you learn about throughout the movie. He thinks he's the good guy, and like that's always the creepiest type of villain where it's like, wow, you are just fine with doing anything to anyone because of this one thing. But yeah, using this concept of conservationism and preserving nature and just doing that as like the justification system for a villain, it really worked. And I think what works about that best is you have to like not only see where a villain is coming from with their justification, with their motive. You can't just see where it's coming from and you can't go, okay, I kind of understand, how they could get there. What I like about it with this one is it introduces a unique conversation that like I think everyone would land in a different place with of yeah, like how many people am I willing to kill to save a really rare animal? Like if there's this really, really rare animal that is just like nothing else on Earth that we've ever known about. How many people? There's billions of people, right? Like, so there is some kind of, I think, some kind of acceptable number probably to that. Like, and then it kind of gets into also this like idea of the preservation of beauty and the perception of beauty. In conservationism too, I had a professor in college who was a conservationist. She was a working biologist, and she would talk about how it's always easy to get policy changes and funding to protect animals that are cute. That's easy. People will inconvenience themselves and commit resources towards saving like a panda, right? They'll do that. But as soon as it's something that's not really cute or we don't like it or it's in some way negatively associated or it's like maybe like a little bit of like a violent thing or whatever, but it's important to the whole ecosystem, then it's hard to get funding or policy changes to protect it. If you go to someone and you say, we want to save this very cute mammal, it's got big eyes, it's cute, it looks like a little teddy bear, everyone's fine with that. People will donate money online to that. But as soon as you inconvenience someone to save like a type of algae or like some type of like worm or something like that, people don't really care. And so then you get into this whole thing where it's like, yeah, this like animal is like kind of monstrous, but like again, should we let it just go extinct just because we're also kind of partially the prey? There's that other thing too, where humans are, in a way, needed by this creature. They need us for a purpose. And so you get into this thing of like, yeah, it's a parasite almost, right? Like, so should I save a parasite? Like, or should I just kill parasite? And it creates just like a fun conversation for people that see the movie of to what degree were his actions excusable? How far would you take it if you could? Would you do anything at all? Would you try to kill this thing? Would you try to save this thing? How many people will you sacrifice to do it? Um, yeah, it was a cool thing, and I like a movie that gives you like a concept to tackle and think about a little bit of like what you would do. Because I love conservationism. I'm a big fan of preserving nature, and big believer that there's more humans than we need. So there's kind of a balance there, right? But like I said, the movie does kind of fall flat at the end. It's not necessarily a bad ending, it just kind of felt generic. And the other thing that I really didn't care for is Gretchen kind of has this whole moment of realization, change of heart kind of event between her and her younger half sister, who she kind of hates throughout the movie, but she had already come around on her, I think, a little bit, where she like liked her a little bit more. And it's just, I don't need a motivating factor for why the character changed and they're now going to save a child from death. Like, you don't even have to know the kid, right? Like, you're just going to try to save it. That's a mammal instinctual thing. And I think for a movie that was talking so much about animal behaviors and just, instinctual behaviors and stuff like that, it felt kind of like they missed it a little bit with that one. This thing occurs and she's just like, all right, well, now I'm gonna save this child from death. And I just didn't think it was like needed. It just felt unnecessary. It was one of those like change of heart things where it was a very specifically timed thing that like it's just, we got lucky that this event happened when it did, that this thing was there. Otherwise, what, she would have let the kid die? Like, pretty much she hears a voicemail that changes her opinion and makes her like this kid more and be like, oh wow, this like child that's only been nice to me and likes me, maybe I should help them. What I hate is like, if you take that out, if she didn't hear the voicemail, I don't believe that she would have left the kid for dead. I don't need some magic moment to convince someone that they should save their younger sibling from death for me to believe it. She could have just kind of done it, and I would have been like, yeah, that's just her being a reasonable person, just a normal human. And then, more specific to the very end of the movie, they did something that I really hate, where Gretchen, for some reason, kind of just had more of an understanding of what was going on. And I don't know how she learned it. It's just, she just realizes something about a certain situation. Again, I can't really say what it is without giving it away. But, someone's like, well, aren't we in danger with that person around? And she goes, no, I think they're different. I think we'll be all right. It's like a huge risk to take. And she just, I don't know. It's just something about it bothered me because it's like, why would she know that? Like, there's no reason. From what she knows, she should know that it's actually not safe, but she just kind of has a good feeling. And I didn't like that. Like, it's like, if you're going to justify her saving her younger sibling, then explain her having some kind of understanding about this paranormal event that she is brand new to. Like, I don't know why. Like, she couldn't have a gut feeling about saving her sibling, but she can have a gut feeling about the nature of a creature that she just learned exist. That was just weird to me. I don't know. I didn't love it. It didn't feel like it matched the overall theme of the movie, because the majority of the movie, it's the experience is about not knowing what's happening, not understanding what's going on, and especially like Gretchen's confusion and not understanding what's going on. And then suddenly she kind of just has this like insight. Again, it was like she just had a good feeling about something, and for some reason knew that this would be okay. You can make a stretch that there was another part of the story that kind of makes it make sense, but like even with that, she should still know that what she is doing is dangerous. And, maybe not dangerous to her, but like potentially dangerous to other people. It just wasn't, I don't know. I didn't like it. They could have gone a little bit of a darker route, I think, and it would have been more realistic, more interesting, and just more entertaining. And then they also tease like a potential sequel. They do the thing, I'm so tired of this at the end of horror movies. Can we ever just have a period instead of a question mark? Does it always have to be like, "Oh, is this actually the end?" Like I don't think that every horror movie has to be left open for a sequel, and it feels like that happens in the genre more than any other genre. I can't think of any other kind of movie where it's just always at the end, like, big conclusion, it's done. Oh, wait, is it? Like, it's just kind of like we don't need that for every single one. Not every horror movie has to have a question mark. Not every horror movie has to have the monster's eyes open at the end, or like a hand twitch or something, like some kind of like thing where you're like, oh no, like maybe there's more. Especially with this movie, this does not need more. You don't need more. It was a fun concept. You kind of fucked it at the end a little bit, but there's not a reason to make any more of this movie. The movie's experience was learning about what was going on, not having it and observing it, and then like the big action sequences at the end of it. Like, that's not the movie. The movie was like, what is this, what's happening, slowly learning about it, conclusion. Don't leave this open, don't revisit it. I don't think it did well enough where it would get a sequel, but really the best way I can describe watching this movie would be, it starts out strong. It starts out with a cool, unique concept. You don't know what's going on. They do a lot of work at making it somewhat believable, which is like the part where true horror gets to kind of set in, where it's like, oh my god, this could kind of happen to somebody. It's really unique ideas, it's unique concepts. I love a horror movie that tries to do something really different. Visually, some very cool components, the altered perception state, liked that a lot. It had just good ideas, good execution, and good performances. Like, no one was mind-blowing. I don't think anyone would get an award for performance in this movie, but none of the acting was like bad. Like, it was all solid. It did pull me in, and what I liked about it was I couldn't figure out what was going on. I had to watch the movie to know what was happening. As a person who watches a lot of movies and TV shows, and I mean, I watch like a lot of like video essays about these things, and read articles about them and interviews with directors and writers and actors and stuff like that. I can really pick up on like formulaic writing pretty quickly, and with a lot of horror movies, I can early and be like, I know who's going to be alive at the end of this, who's going to be dead at the end of this. I know what the consequence is going to be. I know where like the different moments of change are going to occur, and kind of like what they're going to be. So being able to really pick up on like that formulaic writing, the biggest compliment I would say is this is really original, and I couldn't predict where it was going. Like, if you start this movie not knowing anything about it, you don't know what's going on. And I like that. I like that a lot. I genuinely didn't understand what was happening in the beginning, and I love that air of mystery around it, just the uncertainty of, I can't figure this out. And even, going through it, I was coming up with like early ideas watching it of like, I think this is what it is, I think that's where it's going. And no, it got me. Like, it did get me where they took it isn't where I thought it was going. But I do still think the movie is worth watching. I think if you haven't seen it, especially if you don't know anything about it, you should watch it. I think you'll enjoy it. I think most people Most people online gave this movie between like a 6.5 and an 8. Like the average reviews online kind of came out to about like a 75 out of 100. So I think that's accurate. I think there's enough of the movie to like where that score is fair. I think the ending is bad enough where it shouldn't be higher. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of in line with like where I rate it. I still think it's worth a watch though. I mean, the movie looks great. There were some really good creepy scares too. Like they had some shots in this movie that were good. It did suspenseful, unnerving shots very well. There is one scare that used shadows and lighting. It takes place on a road while Gretchen is riding a bike, and I think they did it in a really unique, fun way, and it was legitimately creepy. But yeah, all in all, I give the movie a 3.5 out of 5. It's good. With a stronger ending, it would have been a 4. If they had just done something, if they had ended it on as unique of a note that it started and progressed with, and just as well written as the rest of the movie was, as like strong and sound as the rest of the movie was, it easily would have been a 4. If they went really hard on the ending, it could have even been higher than that. But yeah, unfortunately, a really bad generic ending, it does weaken the experience. If you've heard that elsewhere, which you probably have, that's what a lot of reviews are saying. That's correct. It's not great. But yeah, 3.5 out of 5 would have been a 4, but they screwed up the ending of it. Check it out if you get the chance.